All right. Are we ready now? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. All right, so the interquartile range. Now, what do you think is the problem with using the range as a measure of spread? When do you think it's really not very useful? When there's an outlier, when there's a really high number or a really low number. So you might have a heap of numbers which are all like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all those numbers, like they're all 1 to 5. And then you could have a 300 in there. And then your range would suddenly be 299, okay? And that's not very helpful in really understanding the spread, because that really probably was meant to be a 3 and someone's just accidentally put two zeros on the end, something like that. So an outlier is usually an error. So when we do that, the range isn't very useful. So when we have an outlier. So often instead we look at what's called the interquartile range. And the interquartile range really takes out the outliers. It actually takes out 50% of the data, because the interquartile range is the difference between, so IQR is the difference between the upper quartile. Now we need to know what that means. Now there's a few different words for this. The upper quartile could be Q3, or it could also be called the 75th percentile. It's pretty much the point where 3/4 of the data is. It's that top end. So 1/4 of the data is above that and 3/4 is below it. Okay? So it's between the upper quartile, which can be called Q3, it can be called the 75th percentile, and the lower quartile. The lower quartile, which can be called Q1 or the 25th percentile, or the lower quartile. And so the lower quartile is at the point where there's 25% of the data's there, lower quartile, 75% above it. So it kind of breaks down a set of data into, it's almost like a football game, okay? You have a starting point, you have a first quarter, you have half time, you have 3/4, okay? So half time, when half the data's on the left and half the data's on the right, what's that called in terms of data? It's not half time. We've looked at it before, it starts with an M. Median, okay? So the median is when there's 50%, the median is when there's 50% of the game's been done, 50% still to go, okay? So 50% of the data's on the left, 50% of the data's on the right, okay? So that's where the median is. But the lower quartile is when we're only at quarter time, quarter one, Q1. 25% of the data is in that first section, okay? 25% of the data is in the next quarter. You want to see that? 25% of data is in the next quarter. And what do you reckon we call this point here? It's the third quarter in a football match, but we're going to call it Q3, upper quartile. Okay, Q3. And how much of the game's gone by at that point? 3/4, 75%. Okay, so Q1 is the first 25, median is at 50, quarter 3 is at 75%. And then we end up at the end. Everyone okay with that? So our interquartile range is saying what data's in between Q1 and Q3. So it's half of the data will be there, but it's saying what data's between Q1 and Q3, what's that numbers? And it's a range, so it's the Q3 take Q1. I'll show you how to find those numbers in a second. But that's what it's looking at. It's looking at the range between, in the middle there, above the first quarter of the data and below the last quarter of the data. That is called the interquartile range. All right. Everyone okay? Does everyone have that understanding of what we're actually finding? So whatever numbers there and there, we take them apart, but I'll show you how to find them. So to find Q1 and Q3, so let's start with let's go with Q1. Now we do the same thing for Q3, but I'll show you in a second. To find quartile one, step one. So let's just find, we'll just pick some data. So let's go 2, 5, 7, 8, 11, 11, 13. Now, the way I've set this data up is to find this the easiest way. We'll do some harder ones later on, but it's still the same process each time. Okay. All right, so to find Q1, we're going to use this as our example. What do you think we need to be able to find first? The median. We've got to find the middle to then find the quarters. Okay, so step one is find the median. Now I'm just going to put the steps over here so that we can write underneath that list. So step one, find the median. So for this one, it's a number which is there. Which number is it? 8. It's in the order. So 8 is the median. Now, I'm just going to write a little bit of a step here in the same step. So if the median is a number like this, it's not included in the top or the bottom half because it's actually a number which is specifically, it's right in the middle. You guys see that? It's right in the middle. So it doesn't go to, it's not in the bottom half, it's not in the top half. Can everybody see that? All right, now if I look at, I'll just do a different example at the same time. Where's the median for this set of data? It's between 11 and 15, so the median is 13. Now, notice that the median is not one of the numbers. So where does 11 go? Is it in the bottom half of the data or the top half of the data? It goes into the bottom and the 15 goes into the top if we're splitting it in halves, because it's all about splitting something into half and then splitting into quarters. All right, so there's a difference there. So if the median is one of the scores, it's not included in the top or the bottom. If the median is not one of the scores, it's in between, then one of the numbers goes to the bottom and one goes to the top. So because step 2 to find quartile 1 is to find the median of the bottom half of the numbers. So all we're going to look at, because 8 just counts as being in the middle, we're going to get rid of all these numbers. What numbers are left? What numbers are left? 2, 5, 7. So we're just looking at 2, 5, 7. And we go, okay, if this was a set of numbers and we were finding the median of 2, 5, 7, what would the median be? 5. 5 is Q1. All right, now what about in this set of data here? So this time we include the 11. So Q1 is 8. It should be like a lower one, but anyway, doesn't matter. That's where, this one is where most people make mistakes with this. It's not hard, it's just that they go, where do the numbers, are the numbers included? Or with this, they suddenly add the 8 in somewhere. Or they add the 8 into both. Okay, so if the median is an actual number, we don't include it in the top or the bottom. So how do you find, find the median of the bottom half of the numbers. This is Q1. How do we find Q3? Same thing, but for the top half. Find the median of the top half of the numbers. This is Q3. Perfect. So for this one, got 11, 11 and 13, so therefore Q3 is 11. And for this one, you got 15, 17, 18, so this one Q3 is 17. Now, just a little like be aware if the median is one of the scores, it is not included in the top or bottom half. It just gets discluded, is that a word? Discounted, something. All right. For this one, I always put the line down the middle. So if my median is between numbers, I put a line down the middle and that clearly goes, that's halfway. This is on the bottom half, this is on the top half, to make it easier for you. So if you have to work out the median from two numbers, put a line down the middle, split them in half. Pretty easy? Good. All right. So now we found Q1, we found Q3. What do we still have to find? What's the title of the topic? Interquartile range. So we need to be able to find the interquartile range. So the range between quartile 1 and quartile 3. So how do you reckon we do that? Exactly. So to find the interquartile range, it's Q3, take Q1. So for our first example, so I'll just write example 1 and example 2. For example 1, interquartile range is 11, take 5. So our interquartile range is 6. For example 2, interquartile range is 17, take 8. So it is 9, not 11. Is everyone okay with that? Pretty easy? All right, so once we do this, I'm just going to put two topics into one, which actually gives us like a chapter and a half done in a lesson, which is pretty good. All right, is that we are going to, so once we know the interquartile range, so remember, are people still writing? Remember how we did this bit here, where we had start, so we've got start, quarter, half, 3/4, full time, yeah? What we do with the box plot is exactly this. We pretty much do straight lines, box and whisker plot, okay? Is we do straight lines at start, quarter, half, 3/4, full time. We do 5 lines. Those are the 5, and it's also called a 5-point summary. Minimum score is the start, Q1, median, Q3, what's the end one called? Maximum score. It's called a 5-point summary. Those 5 things, we put 5 lines in, and then we make a box out of the interquartile range and a whisker to the range. So it's called a box and whisker plot. Box for the interquartile range, whiskers for the range. 5-point summary. So let's do an example and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so did you know what though? If you did that for a question where I asked you to do a box and whisker plot, as long as you did it on the right scale, you'd probably only lose 1 mark because you've shown the 5-point summary, you've just not actually done the whiskers right. Everything else is pretty much correct. Okay, so it's not that hard when people were like, I don't want to do this. It's actually probably the easiest graph you could do. All right, so box and whisker plots. show what's called, and you need to know the word 5-point summary because you might just get asked to describe the 5-point summary or write the 5-point summary, okay? So show a 5-point summary. A 5-point summary includes, which is your minimum, Q1, median, Q3, maximum. And you'll notice in your calculator, you know when we got all those stat calculations up, they had those 5 things all in a row. Min, it had X on the end of each one. It had min X, Q1 X, median X, Q3 X, max X. They're all there. But we need to be able to know for a box and whisker plot, we need to remember that it needs to be on a scale. What equipment do we need to use? Pencil and a ruler. We make a box for interquartile range. And then whiskers to the minimum and maximum, which shows you the range. Now, often we'll get you to draw box and whisker plots and then we'll get you to compare them. And so we might say, which set of scores had the biggest range? So you just have to look at how long the whiskers are. Which box had the bigger interquartile range? So you're looking how big the box is and things like that. So I'll show you some examples in a sec. All right, so let's try an example and show you how to do this. So example. And I'm going to try and make the example a little bit tricky. So let's go with this 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 16. This is probably, as much as those numbers seem quite easy, this is probably the hardest box and whisker plot you can do. So if you can do this, you're fine. All right? So step 1 is we'll find the median. Do you know what? I'm just going to write we'll just make this simpler, 5-point summary. Because if we know that, we can then do everything else. So, as we said, we're going to find the median. How do we find the median for this set of data? There are 8 scores, so it's between 8 and 9. So I put the line in. And so what's the median? 8.5. So that splits the data into 2 halves. Okay, the 8's on one side, the 9's on the other. So then we're going to find Q1. Where's Q1? Good, it's between the 6 and the 7. As I said, that's why it's tricky, because there's 4 scores, even number of scores, it's between them. So 6.5 is Q1. Q3, 12, it's halfway between 10 and 14. So Q3. Now we need to know the minimum score, 3, and the maximum score, 16. That is our 5-point summary, 3, 6.5, 8.5, 12, and 16. If you show me those things, you get marks straight away, even if you don't get your graph right. Okay? So, on a scale, it's the scale which is important, okay? On a scale, draw 5 vertical lines for the 5-point summary. So all of those 5 lines, it's almost like what I did with the first 3, but it needs to be on a scale. So our scale needs to go from at least below 3, so I'd start it at 2 and go to at least 16, so I'd go to 17. Everyone understand that? So usually you're just going to get a piece of graph paper and you need to work out your scale. We're just going to see how we go here. So I'm going to start with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I'm just going from 2 to 18. So there always has to be a scale down the bottom. And so we're just drawing 5 vertical lines. You don't need to write the numbers. You don't need to write Q1 or anything. It's just a line to show each one. So the minimum's at 3, so we draw a line. The Q1's at 6.5, so we draw a line. 8.5, 12, and 16. Okay, 5 vertical lines. Now we said the interquartile range is shown with a box. So draw a box between Q1 and Q3. So it's literally just 2 horizontal lines to connect them up. The line in the middle is the median. So the bigger the box, the bigger the interquartile range. So we just did 2 horizontal lines between that. Median will be in the middle. Now, it doesn't have to be in the middle of the box because there might be, one quarter might be smaller than the other because the data might be more spread out in certain areas. And then what's the last bit? Box and whiskers. Okay, so draw a line connecting the minimum and Q1 and the maximum and Q3. They're called whiskers. And therefore we have a box and whisker plot. How do you feel about that? All good? All right, so when would we use an interquartile range versus range? When there's an outlier, okay? The other thing is, there's a reason I really like using this for your test marks and stuff because you can actually see where you're sitting amongst your cohort. So you can sort of go, okay, I'm within 25% of the top of the course and things like that. So you can start seeing where you are in relation to other people when you're looking at test scores and things like that. But it's quite a good, it shows quite a lot of information in a very easy, succinct way if you know how to read them. Everyone okay? All right, so we're going to do some questions from the book. I think we're on to chapter 4, but let me just double check. All right, I'm just going to remind you, exercise 3B, we want you really to make sure that you have done those questions. I have to come back to 3C. All right, exercise 4A. Questions 1 to 10. We've got heaps of time. You've got half an hour, so you should be able to get that done easily. There's some which are find the interquartile range. They're mainly drawing box plots or reading them. Yeah, I'll give you scores back as long as you start working. It was actually really good. The majority. There are still some people who failed. Yeah, of course you can. All right, so half an hour. I would like you to finish those 10 questions and go back and be able to do summer 3B and be ready. You should be able to do that easily. Come on, Ruby. Actually, I will let you skip question. I'll let you skip questions 7 and 9 if you work well. Otherwise, I'm going to come around. If you're talking, I'm going to give you 7 and 9 back. Okay? So you're going to not do 1 to 10. You're going to do, I'm being nice, so don't whinge, or I'll give you 7 and 9 back, yeah? So I'll let you do questions 1 to 6. Oh, it wants you to do them all. That's so weird. All right, questions 1 to 6, 8 and 10 at this point. Everyone understand? 1 to 6, 8, 10.